back to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got an exciting episode of the Dawgcast lined up for today. We're going to have on 24/7 Sports Isaac Trotter for the second half of this episode because we are talking Georgia basketball. The Bulldogs have played past the point where we're just doing the UGA Men's Basketball Minute. The Bulldogs are sitting pretty with one regular season game left. They are now 19-11 overall, 7-10 in SEC play after a 73-64 victory at South Carolina on Tuesday night. That was a game I had a chance to be there in Columbia for. Georgia does not have an SEC road win for the majority of conference play, and then they get two in the span of 4 days. But wanted to do a basketball-centric episode ahead of the regular season finale against Vanderbilt on Saturday, ahead of the SEC tournament, and ahead of what we'll be talking about in a couple weeks, what looks like the Georgia Bulldogs return to the NCAA tournament. Georgia has not been in the tournament since 2015, and it's been a point of conversation, at times a point of contention during the Mike White era. There was a lot of talk from Coach White, from the players during his second season about a return to the tournament. That did not happen, though they did make a run in the NIT. And, there was a lot of attention coming into this year about the team making a run, finally going back to the postseason, something that they had not done since Mark Fox was the head coach. And we're going to start the first part of this episode just talking about their recent play. Mentioned 73-64 win over South Carolina. 3 straight wins. As wild as it seems, Georgia now has the second longest winning streak in the SEC with 3 games. Tennessee's the only one that has them beat with a 4-game winning streak at this point. What has changed for Georgia basketball is sort of what I want to talk about at this point. And I think you have to start with the guard play. Silas Demery Jr. has played outstanding in these last few games. He was named National Player of the Week, SEC Player of the Week last week after averaging 23.5 points. I think he shot right around 57% from the field. Was very important in the win against South Carolina as well. Hit some big shots late. Hit some shots when it looked like South Carolina was going to make a run, was going to make things interesting. Silas has been huge. Big game in that South Carolina win for Blue Kane. Blue, I thought, really helped Georgia stay out in front. With about 9 minutes left in that game, South Carolina makes a run, cuts what had been a Georgia lead for the entire game, and a pretty comfortable one for the majority of it. They cut it down to 4, and then Blue hits back-to-back three-pointers, pushes the Georgia lead back up to 10. And, South Carolina made another run with about 2 minutes left, but again, the guards have played fantastic. And not only are they making shots, which I think is the biggest thing right now, you're kind of running the offense through them, where for the longest time it just felt like this was get Asa Newell the ball and hope one other guy will hit shots. And that worked in some games, especially against inferior competition, against teams that just couldn't hang with a 5-star freshman forward, a 5-star center who, still has a chance to wind up being a lottery pick when it's all said and done. These guys, the guards, the backcourt especially, have really stepped up. They've done a good job, I think, in shortening the rotation, getting some more of those experienced guys. And, as much as I want to talk about Blue and Silas, I think they've earned it. A lot of credit deserved to Tyron Lawrence, Dakota LaFew. I think that we kind of overlooked how important they were, given the time they missed due to injury. The most specific example, neither one of those guys playing in that Texas A&M game where Georgia has a great first half and then probably the worst half of basketball I've ever seen for Georgia basketball, which is saying something. I've watched some bad Georgia basketball over the years, but no, those guys are so important, not only because they make plays, they make winning plays, which is something Mike White said after the South Carolina game, but you kind of have to spell guys like Blue and Silas. They cannot be out there for 40 minutes, contrary to popular belief. But it set Georgia up well. Right now they are tied. We're recording this on Wednesday. They are tied with Arkansas for the 11th spot in the SEC standings. We'll see what happens over the weekend. Again, Georgia will host Vanderbilt 12 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday. That'll be the regular season finale. I think based on what I had seen last, Georgia's probably looking at one of the early games on that opening day of the SEC tournament on Wednesday. But even that said, I think Georgia should feel good about where it is when you look to the NCAA tournament. Looking at the latest brackets on Wednesday morning, it's basically a consensus. Bracket matrix is up to 128 different brackets from experts across the country. Georgia is in every one of those brackets. I think Georgia's about, on average, a 10 seed. And obviously, these next few games are really important. You can try to bump that up. And with the resume Georgia has to this point, it's very possible that they will bump it up, that they will be able to improve on that seeding. If they beat Vanderbilt, a Vanderbilt team that I think is locked into the NCAA tournament, and you win one game in Nashville, that's big. If you win two, you really could probably improve your seeding. The thing to me, however this ride ends for Georgia, I think you have to look at this as a success. I mean, we're talking about a program. The last time they were in the NCAA tournament, I was still in college, and it's been a minute since I've been in college. I know people want to see this team make a run, and they very well may. But to even be in this spot at all, I think is worth celebrating. They made it harrowing. I thought in the middle of February that their chances of making the tournament were pretty much doomed. Again, they lost 9 of 11. And I give a lot of credit to Mike White, the staff, the players too. I think when they had that bye week, not having the midweek game before playing at Auburn, I think they cleaned a lot of things up. I think that they figured out some of the issues. I think the offense just looks night and day different. And just so much more productive since they made some tweaks and had a little bit of time to self-reflect. It's really hard, especially we're talking about the toughest conference probably in the history of college basketball this season, how quickly you have to turn the page and say, look, we might have struggled in this game, but we've got Auburn, we've got Florida, we've got Tennessee. We have got to turn the page and focus on them. Trying to make it, in-season adjustments, especially in conference play, whole lot easier said than done. A lot of people have looked at that Florida game as the turning point for Georgia. I really think it was the Auburn game, and they lost that game by 12. It was a lot closer than that, and that was a game, and I haven't been shy about sharing this with people, that I thought that was going to be a blowout. I figured Auburn was going to win that thing by like 20 points, and I know it was a 12-point game, a lot closer than that. I think that Georgia came out of that game going, we just played the number one team in the country in their place and kept it competitive for 40 minutes. We've got something here. And then obviously you carry that over and you beat Florida. It is really fascinating to wonder where exactly Georgia would be right now if they don't win that Florida game, but they beat Texas, they beat South Carolina. You probably have to beat Vanderbilt, and you probably have to win at least one game in the SEC tournament to be in the mix, trying to make the NCAA tournament. But huge win against Florida, definitely the biggest win of Mike White's Georgia career, which I'm sure has to mean a lot to him because of his time at Florida, and especially the way things ended. I don't think that Mike would be shy in saying he's not happy about how his tenure in Gainesville came to its conclusion, but he's gotten what he's needed late. He's gotten what this team needs, and again, 19 and 11. I think they're in the tournament. I think that the South Carolina win locked them in. You'll feel a whole lot better if you defend your home court against Vanderbilt on Saturday, which I think is entirely possible. This is a Vanderbilt team that lost at home to Arkansas on Tuesday. Very dangerous Vanderbilt team. I'm not going to say that, count it, that Georgia's going to get that one, because I like this Vanderbilt team a lot. But it's entirely possible you get to 20 wins and you go into the SEC tournament with some momentum. And even if you don't need a win in Nashville before the NCAA tournament, getting one, I think, even if they lose to Vanderbilt on Saturday, I think would be a really nice shot in the arm. I think it would be a good kind of reminder of where this team, is right now, how far it's come. Again, there was a period there where it was looking rough, and you can't help when you're in those spots to kind of look ahead and go, okay, well, what's this offseason going to look like because of how things have kind of derailed a little bit. again, ton of credit due to Mike White, ton of credit due to the players, because it is very easy to get discouraged and want to throw in the towel again in an SEC that's just breakneck. And it's why I have a lot of respect for teams like South Carolina. I mean, South Carolina went and lost their first 13 games, I think, in conference play. And then they've won 2 in the last couple of weeks. And they gave Georgia everything they could handle. I really thought South Carolina had a chance to make that interesting in the second half, and they made a couple runs. But Georgia held on, and I think that they should be feeling good about where they stand right now and the path ahead. So we're going to take a quick break, come back, and talk to Isaac Trotter, talk about Georgia, but also talk about SEC basketball as a whole as we get ready for the end of the regular season and continue the countdown to the postseason. I want to welcome on Isaac Trotter to talk about Georgia basketball, but also to talk about the end of the college basketball regular season. And I just want to start, Isaac. Maybe this is coming from somebody that's actually watching meaningful college basketball for the first time in a while this late in the season. But it just seems like, man, this has been such an entertaining close to the regular season across the board.
Yeah, this is as fun of a regular season as I can remember. There's just terrific games night after night. Even last night, it's like, all right, you could pick between Ohio State, Nebraska, which is in double overtime. You had BYU, Iowa State is in double overtime. There's like games going down to the wire left and right. It's just, this is number one goes down yesterday. Auburn loses on the road to Texas A&M. It's just, this is the best time of the year. And this season has been really fun too, right? Scoring has ballooned, the most efficient season in college basketball. Teams are shooting more threes. Like, you're seeing smarter basketball, I think, being played across the board. And, it's awesome. And that's the thing. It's like, if this is just the appetizer, I cannot wait for what March Madness has. Like, this is going to be a whole lot of fun over the next 4 or 5 weeks.
And even just the SEC tournament, before we even get to March Madness, some of these conference tournaments I think are really going to deliver. Now, Isaac, I want to start by talking about Georgia and kind of just a very basic question. They're now 19-11 overall, 7-10 in the SEC. They get a big win on Tuesday at South Carolina. What's your read on this Georgia team? Do you think they are as secure in the tournament picture as it seems like a lot of experts believe?
Yeah, I think they're in. And, it's just kudos to them for finding a way to kind of get it done a little bit. Again, this schedule is just a complete gauntlet for a stretch. And it's like, all right, like, we played Tennessee, Auburn, and Florida in like a 10-day span. And those are 3 teams that we probably could be not stunned at all if they win the national championship. But, I think the biggest thing that I've noticed is just my one hesitation with this group was, okay, the half-court offense. Like, is this going to be a thing that holds them back? And lately, the emergence of Silas Demery, just like really starting to play like the lead guard that he was expected to. And when you get great guard play, it masks so many issues. It covers everything up. All of your flaws go away when lead guard play is awesome. And I think down the stretch here, we've started to see a half-court offense start to really find its groove a little bit. And for stretches, even yesterday against South Carolina, I thought they were getting great shots, generating great touches, and just finding a way to find some momentum there a little bit offensively and find some flow. And, it's hard when so many of these teams in the SEC are terrific defenses, but I think to Georgia's credit, they've done a good job of finding, the answers to the test here down the stretch offensively. And that that's why they're a tournament team.
It's wild. I mean, we're talking about a team that at one point had lost 9 of 11 games, and it seemed like they were out of the picture, especially when you considered what was left. And then play really well at Auburn, and then get that win against Florida, and they've basically just been off to the races since then. And you mentioned Silas Demery. He had 16 points last night. Seemed, even kind of quiet compared to his last few games. Silas coming off being SEC Player of the Week, got a National Player of the Week honor as well. What have you liked from what you've seen of Silas lately and what he's brought to this team?
I think his decisiveness and pick and rolls is getting a lot better. I think he is understanding his spots. He's playing like a big guard is supposed to play. Like, you're 6'5", 190 pounds. Like, assert yourself, assert your dominance a little bit as one of these big on-ball guards. And I think the game has definitely started to slow down for him as well too. It's like he kind of understands where he can get to, understands like, this is such a new team for him. Like, all the guys he's doing pick and rolls with, he hadn't played with last year, right? So you're starting to see that a little bit of a maturation process start to come into play. And when that light clicks on for some of these great guards, it's like, holy crap. Like, this is when it starts to really start going. And you see the confidence start to play with him over and over again. And I think Georgia's done a good job. The staff has done a good job of like playing him off the ball a little bit as well to kind of mix up those touches, make him a little bit of a tougher guard, save his legs a little bit where he doesn't have to initiate offense every time. And, I think you're starting to see this pick and roll offense start to really find itself a little bit because, I think if you look at their synergy page, like they're 13th in the SEC in pick and roll efficiency. Like, that doesn't, I think, tell the full story lately. And it's not factoring in like how much improved that group has gotten. And I think that action and finding added layers to that action, yesterday you saw Blue Kane make plays off ball screens. You've seen Silas Demery make plays off ball screens. You've seen Tyron Lawrence make plays off ball screens. Like, this group has potential to be a lot higher than 13th in the SEC in pick and roll efficiency. And I think we're starting to see some of that come into play here lately.
I want to get your sense of watching this team lately. If you can see this and to kind of explain it, I feel like watching this team, every single game and being there, sometimes you kind of get lost in how much you can really identify this, or if you're putting too much into it. But I feel like watching this team lately, there is a confidence that maybe they lacked earlier in the season. I asked Mike about that after the South Carolina game, where there's twice in the last 9 minutes South Carolina cuts the lead to 4. And as someone who has watched this team have really good first halves early in the season, I think about Tennessee, Texas A&M, especially both those games on the road, and not being able to, put that together in the second half. There was a confidence last night where you didn't really see them forcing passes. You didn't see any kind of panic. Do you sort of get that sense too, Isaac, that this is a confident team in situations like that?
And they're playing smarter. I think the best version of them offensively is when they get a paint touch. And yesterday, it's like it's a 4-point game. It's like, all right, South Carolina's rolling a little bit. Like, what are we going to do? And it's Demery off the pick and roll to the rim. Like, I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not settling for these one-pass jumpers. Like, that kind of got them a little bit into trouble early in the second half. It's like we are getting to the basket. And when you're playing two bigs, for the most part, like, because they kind of are, right? Like, almost every lineup they have is two bigs, and sometimes it feels like 3 when Dylan James is on the floor, right? It's like you have to get paint touches, just getting the ball up on the rim, giving us a chance for offensive rebound, and get us a chance to get to the free throw line. That just is winning basketball. And I think that you're right. The confidence to take good shots, the maturity to take good shots is starting to coalesce here a little bit down the stretch. And it's crazy. It's like when things go well for them, it's a paint touch. When things don't go well for them, it feels like they don't get the ball to the rim at all for like multiple stretches. So it's like, I think the light is starting to, they're starting to understand that a little bit. And the staff is starting to get, I guarantee they're saying that behind the scenes as well too. And you're starting to see them actually execute it down the stretch. Because when things got rough yesterday, it was constant paint touch, and suddenly all of our problems feel a little bit better, and now it's the lead 7 instead of 4.
And I wanted to mention Dylan James because you had mentioned him there. Blue Kane said he felt like he's the unsung hero. I mean, he was humongous in that game, and he's a guy that, honestly, this is 2 seasons in a row where, as a freshman, he really didn't play at all with the SEC play getting going, and then late they gave him some run. And he's been fantastic down the stretch of this season. I think you're going to continue to see him in that starting lineup. Isaac, I wanted to ask you, because I find this really interesting, especially with these last few games, and specifically with that South Carolina game on Tuesday. It was kind of a quiet night for Asa Newell. But in saying that, I almost feel like looking at Georgia, it kind of makes me feel better, because I feel like so much of this SEC play for Georgia was, we got to get Asa Newell going, and if he's kind of having an off night, we really need somebody to step up. And you want Asa to do well, and they did a really good job as far as the boards go against South Carolina. But I feel like, Isaac, this is no longer a team that lives and dies with Asa Newell. They have had other guys step up around him.
No, it's a great point. Now, I would attribute a lot of that to Colin Murray-Boyles yesterday, who I think pound for pound is one of the best defenders in the league. Like, yeah, Jemai Mashack from Tennessee would probably be my choice for SC Defensive Player of the Year. But like, Colin Murray-Boyles had a lot to say about that too. But you're right. It's just like, it's finding different ways to hurt defenses. And I think that's kind of the evolution of this group. And I think on paper, you're starting to see this backcourt like that. There's not a lot of positional overlap. And what do I mean by that? It's like, all right, we have guys doing the exact same thing. Like, I think Dakota LeFew has done a good job of like kind of finding his spots as just like, hey, I'm coming off the bench. I'm just going to go get buckets. And that was a really good evaluation by them. One thing I noticed kind of when I scout the transfer portal is like some of these guys that like they only make catch and shoot threes. It's been hard for them to transfer up to the high major ranks and be effective. Dakota was one of the best off the dribble 3-point shooters last year at Mount St. Mary's. Making those tough shots helps when you transfer up because now your shot selection is a little bit easier, right? Like you're not having to take as many of those tough off the dribble threes, which is, if you look at the stats, it's like one of the most inefficient shots. Georgia like now has like him like coming off the bench as like hey, let's just go get us some offense. Blue Kane, you're a catch and shoot guy, but we can also give you some chances in pick and rolls. Tyron Lawrence, like, yeah, he made a couple of spot up threes yesterday, but for the most part, he is a to the rim type of guard. Pairing him with a Silas Demery, who for the most part can be a little bit of, he checks off so many boxes. Like at the best part about him, like he's probably a true 3-level scorer. But you know what I mean? It feels like this backcourt has 4 guys who almost give you something different. And then you add in Dylan James, you can kind of toggle to some of those big lineups. And suddenly it's like, all right, so yeah, you're right. We don't need you to score 24 for us. We can find offense in different ways. Now, granted, I think the best version of Georgia probably includes Asa Newell playing like one of the best players on the floor. But I do think it shows a little bit of like the vision of this team when they put it together in the portal and the roster building last spring of like, hey, we're not going to be just solely reliant on our McDonald's All-American to lead us.
Now, you look at the conversation we're having, they've got regular season finale against Vanderbilt, SEC tournament. We'll see what they do. And, we feel good about their chances to make the NCAA tournament. I know Georgia fans, Isaac, anyone listening to this is going to be like, all right, well, what are they going to do in the tournament? They're already past the point of getting there. They want to be excited about their chances in the tournament. Obviously, whoever they play is going to have a factor in what they're able to do. But when you look at this team for the tournament, what do you like? What are your concerns with this team when it comes to the actual NCAA tournament?
Yeah, the thing I like about them is how they can toggle between big lineups and small lineups. And that is really important. Like you talked about with Dylan James getting inserted in that lineup, like Georgia's big. And if you talk to some SEC staffs, like they will tell you they are physical too. It's because it's not just like, James is 6'9", Asa's 6'9". Like when they have RJ Godfrey on the floor, he's 6'8", 6'9", just built like an absolute fire hydrant, right? At 6'8". But their guards are big too. Like all of those guards have great positional size. And I think that gives them an opportunity to be pretty matchup dependent because it's like, okay, if we play a big team, we have dudes that can go big. If we play a little bit of a smaller team, we can play 3-guard lineups. We've seen that often this year from that group. And then I think that type of versatility certainly helps. I think for me, like the teams that I want to back in March are the teams that rebound. This group on paper should be able to rebound. And I think defending the rim is going to be really, really important. That's one factor that you look at for NCAA tournament, like success. UConn kind of leaned on that all the way to winning the title last year. It's like, if you can protect the rim at an elite level, not foul, and force teams to just make jumpers over contests, that's a cheat code for defenses. And I think at times we've seen Georgia have that type of ethos defensively where they're going to protect the rim at a really high level. And if that can stick in the NCAA tournament, I think you take your chances as long as this offense continues to grow and develop. Because if you can't score, like you just don't have a chance in this type of era of college basketball where scoring is kind of ballooned. And this late version of this Georgia group, I think I have a lot more confidence in them, getting buckets when they absolutely need it than I did, 3 weeks ago, a month and a half ago. It's like they've really evolved on that end in a real tangible way.
They've come a long way in a short amount of time. I really think it's been a total turn of events, a total 180 since they lost at home to Missouri and then had a a break, no midweek game before they played at Auburn. It is significantly different, and they've made the most of it. There's no doubt about that. Well, Isaac, I want to kind of transition to the SEC as a whole. I mean, the SEC has been the talk of college basketball all season, continues to deliver. We're recording this after Tuesday night, where, as you mentioned, number one, Auburn loses at Texas A&M. Whole lot of entertaining games. We've got some Wednesday games ahead, and then you're going to have the games on Saturday. What do you make of where the SEC as a whole is going into the postseason, and just your thoughts as we're closing in on the SEC tournament?
Yeah, it's funny because Ken Pom comes out with a really interesting story. I don't know if anybody's seen it, of like, are we sure the SEC is not overrated? And he, Ken Pom's one of the most, like, he's arguably like the smartest college basketball mind like out there, super revered. And he had like all this data about like different conferences that have had elite type of metrics, and maybe they underwhelm in March. And I read that and I go, yeah, but I just don't agree with you. Like, I just don't agree with you. Like, and we'll see how it plays out, because I just look at this league and I go, Auburn has everything you need to win the title, and Florida has everything you need to win the title. And maybe I'm not quite there yet with like an Alabama or a Tennessee or a Missouri, but I think those teams have a real chance to make a deep run. And then you kind of look at the middle of the pack, and it's like Georgia, Mississippi State, like Kentucky, Ole Miss, like all of those teams are really, really good teams with loaded rosters. So it's fascinating. I can't wait for the SEC tournament, because I was writing this up yesterday. I'm like, all right, Texas could be like on the bubble, and it's like, all right, you get to play Arkansas in the first round, you get to play Alabama in the second round, you get to play Missouri in the third round, you get to play Auburn in the semifinals, and then you get to play Florida for the title. So good luck with that. Like, it feels like the SEC tournament's going to be a complete bear. And I still can kind of buying a lot of stock in the SEC heading into March, just because I feel like all of these groups, they're physical, they protect the rim, they're super athletic, and the offensive efficiency and development for a lot of these groups has really evolved. And I'm just going to ride with teams that are really, really good offensively this year. And I just pulled this up, like Auburn number 1, Florida number 4, Alabama number 3, Missouri number 5, Kentucky number 6. Like, I'll take my chances that the SEC is going to have a few teams make really, really deep runs.
And it's just crazy to me, Isaac, looking at the SEC tournament, and I'll shout out Justin Ferguson from the Auburn Observer, because he pointed this out a few weeks ago. Just like some of the teams that will have to play in the first round of the SEC. We're talking about an Ole Miss team that's going to probably have to play that I think is still really good. You got, as it stands right now on Wednesday, it'd be a Texas-Arkansas matchup. I mean, like, it is just whoever comes out of this SEC tournament alive, like, kudos to you. I just hope you don't get too worn down.
No doubt. And it's just like, it's again, like it's the path to win the SEC tournament harder than the path to win to go to the Final Four. Like, you could make that case. It's a kind of a crazy world that the SEC is in. But I think it kind of goes back to the resources that this league has invested in being good in basketball. Like, that is really important. And it's been important in the SEC, and in the ACC, it's not right now. And like, there's a lot of groups, a lot of programs that are really struggling with like resources and retention and getting guys in the portal. That's not the case in the SEC. And the SEC is invested in being good in this sport, and you're kind of reaping the rewards of it now. And now we go, right? Like, now we go. It's time. It feels like the regular season is just like this long, like midterm, and now it feels like the test is like starting around the corner. We'll finally have some real answers for a lot of these teams.
And I always like to bring this up, especially because it is Georgia related. But if you want to see how far SEC basketball has come, go back to 2013, 2014. Georgia finishes tied for second in the SEC. They do not make the NCAA tournament. I mean, just think how just insane and just how drastically different it is today.
Crazy. And, I'm like, I don't like necessarily using like the most talented roster in the school history, but like, you kind of think about it. It's like, man, Florida's like, this roster, maybe not the most in school history, but this is a really talented roster. Auburn, like, I can't remember an Auburn team that's looked like this talented. Like, even Georgia, so to speak, you could go and be like, this roster is like, just doesn't look the same compared to some of the other ones in the past. And you kind of go up and down. You could kind of say that about a lot of teams, except for Kentucky. I think this could be one of the least talented Kentucky teams that I can remember. And I don't think Mark Pope is going to have a team this least amount of talent in a long time. This could be the least talented Mark Pope unit in a while. But yeah, outside of that, it feels like so many of these SEC teams have just loaded up with rosters, and you're kind of seeing that right now. And now in the SEC tournament, it's just a war of attrition. It feels like whoever could stay healthy for a 3, 4, 5 day span might have the best chance of winning.
To your point, I've talked to people around the Georgia basketball program, and even before this season started, there were folks telling me this is the most athletic Georgia team since Jim Herrick was the coach, and we're talking 25 years basically. So I mean, it is a drastic improvement, and that's one of the things, especially when Georgia was having that rough run, where it's like, yeah, you are a lot better, but the entire conference is better. Like there just is no margin for error. And Georgia's found a way to right the ship at the right time, and I think they'll be headed to the postseason because of it. Now, Isaac, before we get out of here, I want to ask you, looking specifically at the SEC, give me 2 teams, 3 teams that when we are talking about the NCAA tournament, you are particularly interested in that you think are capable of making real noise.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 that I like and one that I'm selling a little bit. So I think Florida has what it takes to win the title. I do. I think that with those elite guard play, the rim protection, like I talked about earlier, they can cycle in those bigs just to protect the rim constantly. It's like, casually in the middle of the season, we're just going to tap the Micah hand locked in button. And yeah, now we have another 7-footer that we can put in and play, and it will play big minutes for us. So I think Florida is a team that maybe they're not number 1 in the country, but I think they can make a run. I think Missouri has that lineup flexibility that we've talked about too, where they can play big, they can play small, they can play, kind of like a defensive lineup up front. They can play an offensive lineup up front where they get, Mark Mitchell as a mismatch hunter. I like that flexibility with that group. I think making threes and getting to the free throw line is a good recipe to make a deep run. So I think those 2 are teams that I think will make deep runs. I have a hard time getting there with Texas A&M, a really hard time. Like I'm not sure that type of style is conducive to winning 4 in a row, 5 in a row, 6 in a row, where it's like, we just got to get as many offensive rebounds as possible because we're not going to make shots. Like that type of style is frustrating. And then defensively as well, no team in college basketball gives up more unguarded catch and shoot threes than Texas A&M. That's scary to me. That's really scary to me in March, because if you're giving up those open looks because of their no middle defense and they're kind of fine, switching everything and rotating, and if teams move the ball the right way, you can get good threes against Texas A&M. I think that comes back and bites them. And it's ironic that I say this the night after they beat Auburn, but that's just how I felt about Texas A&M for a minute.
And that also just kind of tells you that this league is still just, especially road games. I mean, if you come out of any road games with a win, it's huge. I mean, the 2 ones to me, Auburn's the obvious one. I'm really going out on a limb, saying the number 1 team in the country, but Florida too. I mean, I think if you told me either one of those teams win the national championship, I wouldn't bat an eye. I think they are super talented teams.
Yeah, and it's weird how they're built similarly too, right? It's just like those bigs they can rotate those bigs in. They have, Chaney Johnson at Auburn is like one of the most underrated players, I think, in the sport. Like, I think people who don't watch the SEC, if like you're tuning in, you're like, how is that dude like their 5th best player? Like, if you parachute him into the ACC, he's probably like scoring like 17 a night in that league. So it's just it's crazy. I'm with you though. I think that Auburn and Florida have a lot of those similar recipes. It's just a very, very similar recipe, even if their pieces are a little bit different. The recipes of how they want to win basketball games are pretty close.
I think Todd Golden learned a thing or 2 working with Bruce Pearl. I mean, I think it might just be as simple as that.
It might be. And also retention matters. I think both of those teams, we saw that too. Like, they were huge winners at the NBA stay or go decision, right? Like, Janai Broome comes back, Walter Clayton comes back. And then, when you get those 2 guys, it makes it so much easier to build teams because you have just like those awesome hubs. And it's like, all right, how are we finding guys that best finagle around these 2 superstars? And they've done a really good job in roster building, finding pieces that, kind of just get the most out of their superstars.
Isaac, I really appreciate you popping on. I want to make sure give you an opportunity to plug anything you're working on, anything you're watching out for. And I do want to tell you, try to get some rest these next few weeks because, man, it is going to be an insane, I guess, about a month for all of us.
It's going to be nuts. But you know what? I'm cool with it. YouTube TV needs to definitely pay me because we have I use that quad box more than a lot of people. But yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, Isaac _Trotter. Someone stole my first underscore. And then all my stuff is on 247sports.com or cbssports.com. So we'll have hoops basically every single day, something new. Basically, it feels like every day or every other day for the next 6 weeks. And then the portal starts in a few weeks. So that'll be super fun too.
The most wonderful time of the year. Well, we will wrap it up right there. I appreciate Isaac for popping on. Thanks to everyone who watched us live, everyone who is watching or listening to it after the fact. Follow Isaac's work, follow our stuff over at dogs247.com. Go to our YouTube, go to our TikTok. We are going to have a ton of content and a lot of college basketball content over these next few weeks. So we'll wrap it up right there. For Isaac Trotter, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time.